The Japanese Grand Prix will be the first track where we will see how teams actually stack up in 2024, as it will be the ultimate test for this current F1 grid. And while some teams like Ferrari and Red Bull are expected to take the top 3 podium spots, McLaren will be looking for a mistake from the former two, as Lando Norris is still looking for his first ever victory. But why is Japan such an important track, and why, as our title suggests, will there be no place for any team to hide once the F1 caravan hits the land of the rising sun? There will be a reaction from Verstappen and Red Bull after that terrible Australian Grand Prix when the Dutchman had to retire early due to issues with the brakes, but it's a new race now on a track that basically will show us who is in which spot this year. The qualifiers in Australia showed us that Red Bull still has quite the significant advantage, but things like what happened to Max can shake up the system, and this is why we can still expect an interesting race in Japan. Although Verstappen is the favourite, I think it would be really nice to have a complete race where we can see the obvious improvements Ferrari have done during the winter. Also, there is again the question of whether or not Leclerc and Sainz can beat Perez on a track that is again one of the best in the calendar and one of the most challenging ones, because if they can, then it's another step ahead for Ferrari, another step closer to Red Bull in terms of race pace and qualifying pace. The question then would be if Red Bull's Constructors' Championship is in doubt, because if Ferrari can constantly beat Perez, then it would definitely have repercussions on the Mexican driver. The Scuderia must maintain their great form, not lose focus, because Verstappen will hardly have another race like Australia, if any, until the end of the season. And the reality is that Red Bull are still far ahead, which they probably will prove in Suzuka as well. Suzuka is a legendary track for many reasons, because it used to be the last race of the season and it provided a lot of champions and legendary races like the 1989 and 1990 with the Senna-Prost controversies, but is also known as the track where we unfortunately and very tragically lost the last driver to pass away in Formula 1, Jules Bianchi. It's a track that doesn't forgive if you make a mistake and is generally a place where true champions are born and moulded. Suzuka has been a track where in the years previously only the dominant cars have won, and only 5 drivers in total that have won there that haven't been champions at all, one of them most recently being Valtteri Bottas in 2019. You can see some of the reasons why Suzuka is such a seasoned track in the graphics on screen right now. The longitudinal energy that is required here is gigantic, which means the back tyres suffer a lot on this track. There are a lot of high-speed corners, but medium and low ones as well. However, the pressure is very high, and with Pirelli using C1, C2 and C3 tyres here, which means that they're not expecting rain, even though the primary forecast is that it will rain at least on Saturday. A high downforce and asphalt abrasion, which also means that if your car's rear end suffers, then it's bad news. Following the abrasive tarmac of Bahrain and the unique layouts of Jeddah and Melbourne, many leading engineers are expecting Suzuka to be the best test yet of where their cars stack up in the pecking order. The way the calendar is this year, I think 4 races in, we will have a pretty good idea of where we are, said Ferrari veteran Jock Clear. Japan is a hell of a circuit to measure a car. At that kind of circuit, you're going to find out a lot. Mercedes technical director James Allison agreed, saying it is a track with plenty of fast corners and also some slowish hairpins, so a real test of the car. This year also, the Japanese Grand Prix has been rescheduled from its typical autumn slot, and this adjustment allows teams to better access any shifts in their competitiveness compared to the end of the previous year, and to evaluate their progress during the winter period. Moreover, it marks the debut of Pirelli's latest tyre construction on this track, which was first introduced in Silverstone last July. This modification was implemented to accommodate the increased downforce levels since the beginning of 2023, thereby reducing one more variable in comparison to the initial races. The change in the calendar seems advantageous for Mercedes. Allison explains that the primary issue the team has identified for its struggles this season is the performance decrease of its W15 in hotter conditions. Weather forecasts predict temperatures between 16 and 21 degrees Celsius, which is a full 10 degrees cooler than last year. Suzuka will finally show us what the W15 is actually like on a track of this kind. If we are trying to draw that pattern together, then probably the strongest correlation that we can make at the moment is that our competitiveness drops when the track is warm, when the day is at its warmest, and therefore the tyre temperatures rise with those of the track, Allison said. The rescheduled date of the Suzuka circuit is also significant for Mercedes competitor McLaren. Despite starting 2023 at a disadvantage, McLaren had substantially revamped its car by the time it arrived in Japan, securing a double podium with Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. The team's progress throughout the year was evident in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia and Australia, but now, as it returns to Suzuka, McLaren will gain the clearest indication yet of the extent to which it has progressed in car design over the winter. However, McLaren's primary concerns extend beyond its own MCL38, focusing more on the considerable improvements in race pace made by Ferrari compared to the previous year. But like Mercedes, we are yet to see if McLaren actually are able to compete on a higher level this year. Then we have Ferrari, as this will be the team to watch in Japan. Several teams, including Ferrari, are introducing upgrades for the Suzuka circuit, yet whether these enhancements will suffice to challenge Verstappen and Red Bull in consecutive races remains uncertain. In Melbourne, Ferrari showcased notable strength on a track prone to high graining. However, it was only due to Verstappen's brake issues that Carlos Sainz managed to seize the lead before the Dutchman's early retirement, and you better bet that something like that here is highly unlikely to happen. The primary goal for Ferrari, as we said earlier, should be Sergio Perez, and only if he's beaten then can they move to the bigger fish, which is Verstappen, because Max is basically, of course, in a league of his own. Then, with Sainz not having yet secured a seat, if he again manages to beat Perez, then you're suddenly in a situation where Horner will be looking at him and perhaps seriously considering whether or not the Spaniard can replace Checo next year in Red Bull. There are a lot of things to look out for at the Japanese Grand Prix this year, as it will paint us a much clearer picture of not only if Ferrari can challenge Red Bull themselves, but how significant the upgrade is that the Maranello side have made this off-season, and whether or not they will not have a rival for the second best team. It will also show us if Mercedes can compete in a highly competitive track, a mixture of things that the W15 is bad at, but also things that the W15 excels at, if they even exist. McLaren, on the other hand, will also be a competitive side throughout the course of this season, unlike the last one, and Suzuka will show us exactly where the MCL38 is right now on the grid. It would be audacious to bet against a third consecutive Japanese Grand Prix win for the triple world champion, but whatever the case may be, a circuit as demanding as Suzuka will offer no more place to hide, as the true strengths and weaknesses of the 2024 field are set to emerge. So what do you think? Will Red Bull get back to winning ways, or will Ferrari surprise everyone yet again in what promises to be a very interesting race, especially if we have wet conditions? Thanks for watching. We'll see you very soon in the next video.